Okay. So with all of the craziness and that insane game that was Alabama Ole Miss, we had to bring in some reinforcements. So welcome in Nick Suss, the Ole Miss beat writer for the Clarion Ledger. Thank you so much for joining us, Nick.
Always happy to help y'all out. What's up?
Hey, it's good.
Just that game, the highest scoring FBS game that didn't go into overtime of all time. Just like what was your first reaction? What did you see?
Was it FBS or just SEC? If it was FBS, I completely believe it. But man, yeah, it was wild.
It was. You can fact check that one.
But. Yeah, I don't know. I just know watching the game that there came a point in the late third, early fourth quarter where everyone in the press box was looking around and like, should we just schedule our tweets that they're going to score in 4 minutes? I don't think anyone in the stadium or anyone watching on the television was confident either defense knew how to tackle or cover or make stops. And I think almost everybody who followed Ole Miss this year knew Ole Miss was going to be the one to run out of steam, just because if one of these defenses had to make a stop, it's probably the one stocked to the brim with 4 and 5 stars instead of the one that made Kentucky look like the best rushing offense in the country. But I mean, Ole Miss's offense is working as efficiently as I've ever seen an SEC offense work. This isn't like, oh, they're hitting on a couple of big plays and it's skewing the stats. They're averaging almost 12 yards per completion. 12 yards per attempt, a lot more than that per completion. And they're averaging the second most rushing yards per game in the SEC, and they don't actually look that good running the ball. They're just tearing it up on offense, and I guess Lane Kiffin's good at this offense thing. We knew it was going to happen. We just didn't think it would happen this early against teams like Florida and Alabama.
So I know Nick Saban said he thinks Ole Miss might have had their signs. Lane Kiffin went on Twitter to say that's not what happened. What did anybody ask Lane about that? And what was that what was his answer? How was that, unfolding?
So Lane pretty much called that accusation wild and inaccurate because, okay, so think about it. Ole Miss is averaging 77 offensive plays per game this year. To put that in perspective, LSU averaged 72 and a half last year. So the LSU offense that was arguably the best, most efficient offense in college football history, Ole Miss is averaging 4.5 more snaps per game. In order to fit that many snaps in, you have to run a hurry-up offense, which means, as Kiffin put it, they're calling their next play before the last play even ended. So if Ole Miss had Alabama's signals, what the heck would they be doing with them? Because Ole Miss is already getting to the ball and calling its play before Alabama has called a play. So if you're waiting for the other team to call a defensive play, you can't run tempo. So just logically, it doesn't make sense for Ole Miss to have used the signals. Did they have the signals? Who knows? It's possible. But I think what's more realistic is Ole Miss watched the tape of what Texas A&M did against Alabama, and that was gash Alabama between the numbers. Hit them with tight ends, hit them with slot receivers, go over the middle, and just throw until Alabama's safeties break coverage. And Ole Miss did that a lot. And maybe there was sign stealing, but not sign using. I mean, I can't imagine. There was only one time in the game that I remember looking to the guy next to me and saying, what's happening? They're not running a play. They ran a fake count or something like that. And I was like, that's weird. They're just standing around. This is surreal. So maybe, I don't know. I'm not going to come out and defend Lane Kiffin. Maybe they did have him, but why? Why would they use him?
Do you think Nick Saban hasn't changed his signs in the 5 years since Lane Kiffin's been there?
Perhaps some inside info.
Yeah, that's another thing Kiffin said. Kiffin said he didn't even know the signs when he was at Alabama. And maybe that's just a thing you say. But he's like, why would I pay attention to what the defensive hand signals are when I'm the offensive coordinator? And also, when Kiffin was there, their defensive coordinator was Kirby Smart. That's how long ago it was. So there, I think 3 defensive coordinators removed. It was Kirby Smart and then Jeremy Pruitt, and then maybe Tosh Lupoy in the middle, and now Pete Golding.
Yes. Yeah.
So if Saban has kept that much consistency in the defensive signals over 5 years and 4 defensive coordinators. I mean, good on him, it works, but if Kirby didn't use his signals against him and Jeremy Pruitt didn't use his signals against him and Jimbo Fisher, I mean, he's 21-0 against his former assistants. You'd think if he didn't change his signals, someone would have noticed.
Good point.
Very true. And in Lane's post-game conference, he said it's not every day that you get to kind of make the number one team in the country, number one, number two team in the country feel uncomfortable. And it's not every day that you have that opportunity to beat them. So he was a little bit frustrated with his team and with the fans too, who were giving them, a standing ovation after the game. He was like, we didn't win. We had this incredible opportunity and we didn't win this game. But do you think that was Ole Miss's last chance to win a big game? They have some statement games coming up in Texas A&M and Auburn and LSU later this season. What do you think those games are going to look like?
No, I think that if you look at the schedule ahead, the next 5 games, or rather next 4 games on the schedule, all feel somewhat winnable right now. You have Arkansas this week, and Arkansas has looked improved, but I think most people right now would say Ole Miss is a little step ahead of Arkansas. And then you have Auburn, who has struggled in pretty much every game it's played this year. They beat Kentucky off of a bad ref call, and then they lost to Georgia and beat Arkansas off of a bad ref call. So you have no idea what this every year Gus Malzahn's teams are weird. I'm not going to say they don't beat Ole Miss by 30. They lose to Ole Miss by 30. I'm done predicting Auburn games. 2017, weird fun fact, I went 0-7 picking Auburn games. I somehow was that wrong. They went like 4-3 of those games. I couldn't get them right. I don't know what's happening.
What Auburn's going to do? Are they going to get lucky, or are they going to look terrible?
I don't know. But so then you go Arkansas, you go Auburn, Vanderbilt is after that, and then I believe South Carolina is the game after that. There's a bye week in between somewhere. But theoretically, you can win those 4 games, especially with the Auburn game being at home. Then you're sitting at 5-2 in a 7-game SEC schedule, and you got to feel pretty good about that if Auburn is winnable. And even if Auburn's not winnable, you're sitting at 4-3 with a stretch run against Texas A&M, Mississippi State, and LSU. And gosh, if you told me 2 weeks ago that LSU and Mississippi State would both look winnable, I wouldn't have any idea how that happened. But yeah, this Ole Miss team, I'm not going to guarantee they're going to win 6 or 7 games. I think that's still kind of foolish when they have, and this is not an exaggeration, statistically on pace for the worst defense in the history of the FBS. But their offense is pretty exciting, so maybe they can win some of these games.
And that's kind of been the trend for the entire SEC so far this year, is like super exciting offense. The defense is a trash, hot garbage, but the offense is fun to watch.
Yeah, no, I'll hit you with a stat that I wrote about earlier this week here. I'm going to give you a full list of all of the teams in the history of Division I college football who have allowed 600 or more yards per game.
Okay.
The 2018 UConn Huskies. Okay, that's the full list.
Go Huskies.
And right now, Ole Miss's defense is about 25 yards per game worse than that UConn team was. There are 3 teams in the history of the FBS that have allowed more than 50 points per game. Ole Miss is doing worse than 2 of those 3 right now. Oh. If you guys watch LSU, all of your listeners will watch LSU. Right now, Ole Miss is giving up 150 more yards per game than LSU is.
That's pretty bad.
When you want to talk about defenses that just look like they have no answers, Ole Miss has to find something. And I know they've played against both Florida and Alabama so far, and that's going to skew anything. They haven't had the luxury of playing Vandy and Missouri like LSU did and still didn't look great. But, man, they made Kentucky look like the best rushing offense in the country. Kentucky ran for 400-plus against them. Florida threw for 400-plus against them. And Alabama ran an even offense, and all they did was put up 730 yards.
Casual.
They got to pick something. You can score all you want, but if you're giving up 50 points and 600 yards a game, you're going to lose.
I mean, yeah, Najee Harris put up 200-plus rushing yards.
Yeah, and to be fair, 75 of those were in the last minute of the game, but they still didn't tackle him.
Exactly.
I mean, is the entire FBS now the Big 12? Is that where we're going now?
I think that all football is the Big 12. Maybe like not the Chicago Bears. But every other team in the country kind of plays in the Big 12 right now. I love it. I'm not the kind of person that salivates over the memory of the 2011 LSU-Alabama game, that we got to play more 9-6 overtime games. I was at this Ole Miss-Alabama game, and you know what's fun? Watching offense. I love a good defensive game, and I love a good pitcher's duel in baseball. And yeah, if you got a goalie fest in hockey, that's fun to watch. But man, every sport is better when teams are scoring more, except maybe golf. I don't know. Like, the better offenses are, the more fun it is. So yeah, bring on the Big 12. Let's forget the days of the SEC being 4 yards in a cloud of dirt. Let's have some fun. Let's have every team have their own Joe Burrow.
Oh yeah. Speaking
I'm
of,
all for that.
you tweeted a great chart of Matt Corral's stats ranked against the most recent Heisman winners from, I think it was Marcus Mariota to Joe Burrow. What do you think the Heisman race looks like this year, with everything just looking weird in general? And where do you think Matt Corral stands when you think about the best quarterbacks, or even just Heisman contenders this year?
Let me put on my pretentious voice for a second. As a Heisman voter,
Excuse me.
I did not.
Yeah, I have no idea what to do, because last year it was a much easier vote. I put the best quarterback in the country, number 1, the best defensive player in the country, number 2, the best receiver in the country, number 3. That was pretty easy to figure out. Joe Burrow was the obvious quarterback. Chase Young was the obvious defensive end. I thought Jamar Chase was the obvious receiver.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the best quarterback in the country might be Zach Wilson at BYU. It might be Mac Jones at Alabama. It might be Matt Corral. It might be Trevor Lawrence, who's yet to throw an interception or play in the third quarter, it feels like. But is Trevor going to ever play enough to get this Heisman trophy? I don't know. Is somebody like Kyle Pitts, who you guys are going to get to watch and marvel at and probably see score 3 touchdowns this week?
I won the Kyle Pitts for Heisman train. That is like, I'm starting a campaign I had 2 weeks ago. I am here for it.
For USA Today, I have to submit every week who would my top 3 be if I had to vote today. And this week I had Zach Wilson number 1, Najee Harris number 2, and Kyle Pitts number 3. I mean, I think that there's no real answer. It's too early to say. No defensive player has stood out to maybe get on the list. And all of the quarterbacks are kind of the same. I mean, Zach Wilson's thrown like 6 incomplete passes all season, and he's run for 6 touchdowns and throw for 10. He's been great, but it's BYU. And in a year where nobody's playing non-conference games, it feels kind of unfair for the independent team to be doing what it's doing. But yeah, Matt Corral, to answer the heart of your question, has been as good as any quarterback other than Joe Burrow to start 3 games since the offensive era, the boom expanded in about 2013, 2014. I mean, he's putting up numbers very comparable to what Baker Mayfield did in his first 3 games, very comparable to what Kyler Murray did in his first 3 games. But Matt Corral did so against Florida, Kentucky, and Alabama, whereas Oklahoma's first 3 games of the season, I think, Baker played against Ohio State, and that's one really big game, but other 2 are non-conference games. I think one was against Florida Atlantic or something like that. It's different playing against Big 12 and non-conference defenses than playing against Alabama and throwing for as well as he did, and playing against Florida. And, well, maybe playing against Florida is a bad example now, but these teams are supposed to be great. Right. Kentucky had the 2nd best pass defense in the country last year and then returned 4 starters. Matt Corral threw for 330 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns against them. I mean, he's playing really well, and he's been a shockingly effective runner. I mean, I looked at it. Kyler Murray, I think, ran for 170 yards in his first 3 games, and Matt's run for 160. I mean, he's doing better than you'd think for a team that used a running first quarterback last year and pretty much didn't ask Corral to do anything. Turns out he can run pretty well too. He's been really good.
I was also a very big fan of John Reese Plumlee. Was very upset when he was not the starter, but obviously Matt Corral seems like the right decision there.
Definitely seems a lot more comfortable in that position. I'm saying put JRP in at running back.
So here's a weird fact that I don't know how true it is, because I found one guy that the SIDs didn't. But apparently coming into Saturday's game, in the Saban era at Alabama, only 5 players had run for 100 or more yards and 2 touchdowns against the Tide. And they were Darren McFadden, Todd Gurley, Zeke Elliott, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and some guy from the Citadel who I don't remember. Ole Miss had 2 guys do that on Saturday. Both Jerrion Ealy and Snoop Connor did that in the same game. And so when you're looking at Clyde, who had one of the best seasons any SEC running backs ever had, Todd Gurley, who was phenomenal, Zeke Elliott, who's phenomenal, Darren McFadden, who was a 3-time Heisman finalist, I think. That's the company Ole Miss just put 2 guys in the same game. Where are you going to put JRP? You got the best slot receiver in the country in Elijah Moore. You can't put him in the slot. You got 2 running backs who are putting up massive numbers, and you got a quarterback who's on a Heisman shortlist right now. It stinks for JRP, but like the best place he fits right now is left field.
It's fair.
We love a dual sport athlete.
But you see like these crazy numbers that Ole Miss is putting up, and they have so much talent on the field, but they're just not winning these big games. What do you think has to change? What is going to make them tip over the edge and be that team that beats Alabama every year?
I already said the 2018 UConn stat, so let's see what else I can say. I mean, they got to recruit defensive players. It comes down to when Matt Luke was the head coach, they were on recruiting probation, and they could only recruit so many players. So they recruited starters and then offensive backups. They really couldn't recruit depth on defense because they were limited, and that's kind of what they had to sacrifice. And those are the classes that right now would be the juniors and seniors on this team. So you look at the depth on this team and you think, why are they 7 deep at wide receiver and don't have a single safety? Like they're playing 2 converted corners at safety. How does that happen? How do you go from just put a receiver over there? And they did try that in the spring, and it's just not working. They don't have any defensive linemen right now who they seemingly trust. I mean, they lost all 3 of their starters last year, and all 3 of them made it onto NFL squads. They have good linebackers, but when you don't have good defensive linemen in front of you or good defensive backs behind you, it's tough. It's really tough to win on linebackers alone. So they're going to need to find a way to recruit some defensive skill guys, some big guys in the middle. They got to stop getting pushed off the line of scrimmage. They got to stop giving 10 to 15 yards of cushion on any route. And maybe, just maybe, if there's one offensive quibble, get better at snapping the ball. But that's really the only issue the offense has had this year.
Yeah. And so they've kind of had to be creative with how slim their roster is just in terms of recruiting. But they've gotten so creative with play calling. Some of the plays that Lane called in the 4th quarter, I was like, okay, who's going where? Who is this person? Who's throwing the ball? Because it's not the quarterback. Like, I mean, Lane has just showed himself as to being like an absolute mastermind. Like, is he the guy? Is he going to be the guy that gets Ole Miss to that next level?
Well, credit where credit's due. He's not actually calling the plays. Jeff Lebby is. So give both of them credit. Jeff Lebby, who was the offensive coordinator at UCF last year and comes from the coaching tree that shall not be named. But, I mean, I've got a pad out here. I'm going to scribble down what my favorite play of the year was just because – is this an audio podcast? Does this even matter?
We can do – it goes on YouTube as well. So.
Okay. So they did this crazy thing against Kentucky, which I thought was super cool, where they have this formation right here, pistol formation, running back offset, and you have an H-back right here. That's Kenny Yeboah. At the snap of the ball, Corral fakes a handoff to the running back, who was Snoop Connor, and all 3 of the linebackers see the play action and dive straight in. Got that. Kenny Yeboah at H-back takes a step inside the guard and runs to hit the middle linebacker. So he's standing there as a lead blocker to lead block on the play action. Corral takes the ball out of Snoop's hands, and Kenny just runs through the linebacker and just still looking like he's going to block with his hands up, then turns around and is standing uncovered in the end zone while 3 of the linebackers and 2 safeties all bid, and Corral jump shoots. He just lofts the ball, flips it. Nobody's within 10 yards of him because they used Yeboah as a fake lead blocker on an H-back insert on a pistol play action in the red zone. And then that might not be the most creative way they got Yeboah the ball in the end zone this season, because they've also run an under center strong eye with their tight end lined up at fullback and had Corral in a strong side bootleg off of play action against Florida to find Yeboah in the flats. And against Alabama, I don't know if you guys saw this one, they ran a straight up jump pass, a Tebow fake quarterback draw jump pass to find Yeboah in the back of the end zone. Then in the 3rd or 4th quarter, they ran it again and got a pass interference call when Alabama's defenders were just hugging on to Yeboah because they knew he was about to beat them in the flats. They're using their tight end. kind of like LSU used Clyde last year. Just put him anywhere you want on the field, call the weirdest plays in the world, and it's just working. It's so much fun watching these guys play. Again, the thing about Kiffin is, what does he do? Like, I'm opening this to you guys. When you think of a Lane Kiffin offense before this year, what do you think of? Because at USC, he had a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback running the pro style. He had a Heisman Trophy winning running back running a 2 running back system. At Alabama, he had Amari Cooper win the Biletnikoff. He had Derrick Henry win the Heisman. He had Jalen Hurts win SEC Offensive Player of the Year. At FAU, he had Devin Singletary lead the country in rushing touchdowns, and then Harrison Bryant win the Mackey for best tight end. How is that the same scheme?
It's definitely not. I think what Lane does is you just kind of puts his players in a position to succeed, but it's always a different one.
Yeah.
And it's kind of just like, we're going to throw it up and see what happens. And it works for him.
Yeah.
It's kind of similar to how I think Sean Payton utilizes Taysom Hill. It's just like, don't get comfortable wherever you are, because you are going to be in every single position possible.
Yeah. It's something I've said entirely too many times in the last month or two, but the one advantage Ole Miss has over every other team in the SEC this year is that Lane Kiffin could just decide one week, screw it, I'm running something different. And the thing the opponent has prepared for the entire week just doesn't show up. If he wants to one week come out and run the I formation and pound Snoop Connor and Jerrion Ealy the way he pounded Lendale White and Reggie Bush, he can. He has the infrastructure to do that. If he wants to come out and run 4 wide and use Jonathan Mingo and Elijah Moore and some of these receivers to expose secondaries, he can. And of course, other teams can do that to Ole Miss without the element of surprise. They can just line up and say, this is what we do. Here, have our plays. We're going to beat you with them. But Ole Miss can keep up, and that's what kind of makes this team so fun.
You know, as somebody who was on the 2016-17 LSU beat, and you had to go to Ole Miss, who was on a, recruiting restrictions, all of those things like you talked about. How much fun is this for you to be able to cover a team who's clearly so much fun? And we went through those LSU years. They weren't much fun. How good is that for you?
For people who don't exactly know my backstory, I covered UGA, and then 2 years later they went to the college football playoff. And then I covered LSU, and 2 years later they went to the college football playoff. So I've had a bit of FOMO when it comes to I leave a beat and then the schools get really, really good. So I don't know. It's kind of fun getting to see a team actually do things while I'm here instead of being like, I hate how true this is. Joe Burrow committed to LSU on a Tuesday, and that Wednesday my company announced it was going out of business.
Oh no.
So I just missed all of the fun. And here at Ole Miss, I'm watching a team that, who would have thought that Matt Corral would be doing what he's doing after he got benched last year? Yeah. Who would have thought that Elijah Moore, we don't talk about enough how he changed everything. He's the architect of what the SEC looks like right now. And oh yeah, he's playing his way into being a day 1 or day 2 NFL draft pick. Who would have thought this stuff could happen? It's so much fun watching this team, and I don't think they're going to win more than 4 or 5 games, but they're going to be the most fun team to watch in the SEC week in and week out. So
one non-football question to leave you with.
Yeah.
What did Lane have on his face on Saturday?
So, a rag? I don't know. It was branded by the same company, I believe, that makes the LFG shirt that he wore.
Okay.
The other day. I think he's brand loyal to LFG shirts now.
I think I am now too.
And he pregame wore a mask that had Manning 1810 on it for Archie and Eli, and probably for another Manning, but we can get to that in 3 years. And then in the middle of the game, he switched to one that said Metcalf 14. So he is always recruiting. He is trying to remind people, hey, this DK Metcalf guy that's one of the most exciting players in the NFL? He went to Ole Miss. Yeah. He actually played at Oxford High. He is from here. Come to Mississippi, and you too can become a 6'6" man with 14-pack abs. That's where we grow them. he's always recruiting. He's always trying to get these guys. And I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if that's one thing that Ole Miss is doing well right now. The "Are you ready?" chant before the game on Saturday. They brought back Bo Wallace and Cody Pruitt and all the guys from that 2014 upset of Alabama. They are starting to bring in some of the guys that, when Ole Miss was the most fun in the Hugh Freeze era, they weren't doing it as the like bow tie, prim and proper image of Ole Miss. They were kind of leaning into the dirty South kind of Ole Miss attitude. And I think they're starting to lean into that again. They're starting to be fun instead of the team that's like, oh, we weren't cheating. That's somebody else. This is a new era. We've cleaned up our act. Lane Kiffin is kind of teetering on the edge of like, yeah, we're going to win games, but also when we force turnovers, our players are trading around a bag of money. I mean, let's have fun.
I love it. Yeah, work smarter, not harder, because everyone else thinks he's just wearing a pair of underwear across his face, but no. He's recruiting.
He's wearing a pair of underwear.
16-year-old football players across the nation are watching.
Yeah, and if you got a pair of underwear with DK Metcalf's name and number on it, good for you. I mean,
should wear that on your face.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, Nick, thank you so much for joining us. We'd love to have you on the SCP again whenever Ole Miss wins the national championship 2 years after you leave Oxford.
Of course. I mean, that's how it's going to go, and I think every Mississippi fan would love that, and every Mississippi State fan can't wait for me to not leave.
Definitely.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank y'all.